Hello and welcome to my guide on how to fix Chinafake stuff. As you might know, I'm quite good at it. And there's a lot of experience involved and a lot of also just a lot of knowing how to do stuff. So I'm gonna show you how to do stuff. And we're gonna go through all the little bits and bobs you'll need to successfully fix a Chinafake, or to successfully fix various Chinafake problems. We're going to go through how to fix them, how to fix a lot of very common Chinafake problems, and we're going to go through what not to do when fixing this kind of stuff. So first we're going to talk about what you are going to need. There's a thing stuck to that. We're going to need screwdrivers. I recommend using a flathead as well, just to get those particularly finicky screws out. You're going to need replacement battery contacts. If you're replacing battery contacts, you're going to need replacement battery contacts. Make sure you get all three types: bridge contacts, negative contacts, and positive contacts. You're going to need replacement screws, if it ever comes to that as well. So, stock up on screws. More screws. Stock up on lots of screws. Perhaps the most important part of any Chinafake repair is replacing split gears, because that's inevitably going to happen, so you're going to need lots of gears. You can find big lots of them like this one on Amazon, and if that does not help, you can search for the specific measurements of your gear and get one delivered. If the item in question has a bad switch, you're going to need lots of switches. You're going to need some resistors. I have a larger kit full of various resistors of various different specifications, but I don't know where I've put that, so we're using this one. You'll need wires. You'll need a soldering iron, which I don't have handy right now, but we're just going to demonstrate what to do with the soldering iron. So I'll just use a tip. I'll just point a tip at the parts you're supposed to solder. But you'll need a soldering iron, soldering wick, obviously solder, which I also don't have, but you know how to use a soldering iron probably, and if you don't, you should go figure out how to do that first. Flux, soldering stuff for soldering. And very rarely, if something gets stuck in a crevice, you're going to need a little magnetic pickup tool, big long magnet on a stick. You only want to use this in very extreme and dire situations because it might damage components. Try and get it out with a pair of tweezers or something. Try and get the screw or gear or whatever out. Well, the gears aren't going to be magnetic, but try and get the screw or the capacitor or whatever out with a pair of tweezers first before you attempt the magnetic pickup tool. Now, we're going to go over how to take apart a Chinafake. You want to always remember the BODTC rule, and that's batteries out, don't touch chip. Now, we're going to set the battery screw off to the side with the battery compartment so that we don't get mixed up with any other screws. Now, as counterintuitive as this seems, you want to actually run the toy while you're taking the batteries out. Then you can turn it back off. And what that does is it helps get rid of any residual power that may be residing in the system. Make sure it's all used up. Nothing's hanging out on any capacitors or anything before you trying to think. Oh yeah, before you couldn't remember words there. Before you take out the before you take the thing apart, so that if you do touch the chip or if you do touch any components, you don't want anything to short. So there's going to be less of a risk of that if there's no residual power hanging around. Now, we're going to take the toy apart very, very carefully. We're going to remember that we had it in this orientation. Right? And we're going to arrange the screws in a little diagram of sorts so that we can remember where each one went when we put it back together. And this will help prevent you from getting screws mixed up. Even if all of the screws are the same, I suggest you do this anyway, because if you can tell, if you forget which screws go to which part of the thing, you can do a little screw, you can consult the screw diagram and figure out which parts go to which. So now we are ready to take the thing apart. Or are we? Let's see. It looks to me like all the screws are out. Yep, there we go. Got it. Take the thing apart carefully. Again, we're going to ensure that the wheels are in the right spot, in the right orientation. Going to set this off to the side so that we don't damage any wires. I'm going to set this tail very carefully off to the side as well. Now, I'm going to come up with a little rhyme for keeping track of this. Number 1, batteries out. If you're not careful with the gearbox, gears might fall out. And don't lose pieces you can't do without. That's a good philosophy to follow. So, let's start with the most simple of repairs. Let's say, for instance, that, I don't know, we've got bad battery contacts or missing battery contacts. You want to desolder this. You want to remember, you want to take a photo of this. You want to know this wire went here and this wire went here. You'd desolder them, you'd fold these tabs up, carefully maneuver them out. Remember which things were in which orientations. And it looks like this battery contact right here fell out. That's not good. So, let's bust open our pack of bridge contacts here. Grab a new one. Make sure we're putting it in the right direction here. Be careful. Carefully put it in. Carefully make sure it's all the way down in there. Nothing's gonna collide with it when you try to put the battery cover back on. There we go, we've replaced a contact. You might need to do a bit of soldering if you're replacing things that aren't bridge contacts, but nothing super ridiculous, remember. Always keep that there. You want to remember where that went. Now moving on to slightly more advanced repairs. Right, we're going to talk about gear-related stuff, right? So, you want to take a video or a picture of all around the gearbox. You want to see where everything is, where all of the gears go, where all of that is. going to set this off to the side here because it keeps falling, but I'm going to remember where it went. We've got a photo of where it went and the way it went. So now it's time to take apart the gearbox. Again, don't be careless with the gearbox. Gears might fall out. We're going to, first, what I find to be the best way to do this is to remove the gearbox from the base of the toy first up. So we're going to undo all the screws that are keeping the gearbox held to the base of the toy. We're going to also remember our little screw diagram. We're going to arrange the screws the way that they were, roughly at least, in the toy so that we know which screws go where. I'm going to ensure that there we go. See, the screw was here and the screw was here, and we've preserved their positions so we know where to put them. Two more screws here. In the front, you can see it's already starting to come off, and you should probably remember where this gear went. I want to hold this down so nothing breaks. Undo this. And add these to our screw diagram so we remember where everything went in relation to everything else. Like so. There we go. So we've preserved the positions of all of the screws. So we can look at these screw diagrams, match them up to the screw holes, and know which screw went where. Now we've removed the gearbox fully. This does something else. So we're going to set this gear off to the side. This is a piece we can't do without, remember? So we're going to... And now we're going to take apart the gearbox. And we're going to talk about the two repairs that require you to take apart the gearbox. The two that... the two repairs that may require you to take apart the gearbox. And those are a locked motor and a split gear. Now keep in mind that locked motor does not always entail you taking apart the gearbox. Sometimes you can unlock it without that, and I'll demonstrate that quickly right now. You want to hold onto both sides of the wheels like this and turn it. Push it down. See how I'm moving the gears? Sometimes you might not be able to do this because of the way the gears are arranged. If you hear clicking, like that, or cracking, that means that you are doing it too hard and it's not possible to do it that way, and you might want to stop before you screw up any gears or split them accidentally. So now we're going to take this apart. There you go, that came off nicely. I'm going to set this, I'm going to set it in relation to where the screws were, so we know that's where that goes. Can't see this, it's off camera, but these two screws here go here. But wait, I fooled you. They go like this, I think. They are the same. They're not the same size screw, so this is where it becomes important. So you gotta remember. Yep, if you ever are confused, like I just was right there, look at the length of the screw holes, the standoffs. Right there, see? These two. So, let's say now that we've got we're going to talk about two different things, right? Thing number one, locked motor. We're going to take this off. You're going to very gently spin this motor around. Now, you might want to do it while the toy is on, or at least while the on switch is on, so that the power does not go directly to the chip. Because remember, every motor is also a generator. So you don't want to feed power back into the chip, especially if it's being fed into places that it shouldn't be fed into. If you want to be super careful, you can desolder one end of the motor. You might also want to replace, if the capacitor on the motor is bad, you might want to replace that. And the second repair that we're going to talk about, obviously you want to turn the toy on afterwards, make sure the motor movement worked. Now we're going to talk about the next repair that you're probably going to run into having to do. I'm going to set this off to the side here. And that is a split gear. When you're opening a gearbox and the toy doesn't move properly, you want to inspect all of the gears, including the ones in the bump and go. You want to open the bump and go. We're going to talk about how to do that in a sec. And by in a sec, I mean like 5 minutes, once we close the thing back up. We're going to talk about bump and go repair. But it's important that you remember where all the gears went. So take a photo where all the gears are. If there are gears on the top of the gearbox, you may want to remove them from their gear shafts before you open up the gearbox, as this will prevent gears from being dislodged. You might not be able to even put them back together because of the way the gearbox is set up. So you want to make sure you don't do anything like that. Oh, another thing I want to mention is you're also going to need speakers. I don't have those on hand, again, right now, but they're pretty easy to get. You can just search, like, speaker for toy or whatever. They should look basically exactly like there are two slightly different sizes of speakers that are used by different sorts of Chinafake, so you might want to measure the size of yours in millimeters. Look that up. Make sure you've got the right one. So, split gear. Let's pretend this gear is split, right? It isn't, but we're going to say it is, right? So we've taken that off the motor. We want to make sure we know where that went. So we're going to... Gears do tend to fly off of places when you aren't careful. So there was a mistake I made there, but remember where the gear went. Take this gear, put it off to the side. You want to find a similar or equivalent gear. So we're going to pop open our little tray of gears here. And we're going to look for a little short worm gear. Something. I'm going to pull it out if we can manage to pull it out. Here. Oh, had it. That fell out. There we go. So we have looked in this area here with the worm gears. And we found a similar or equivalent gear. This should work well enough. We can put this on the motor, close the gearbox back up, and we should have a fully functional toy, at least in terms of movement. Now that's all the gearbox repairs you're going to need to know how to do, so we're going to close this back up now. Make sure you remember... Oh, wait. We have to put this gear back on here. Like this. Sort of push it back on until it goes on, right? Might want to try the other side if it isn't going on. There we go. That was it. That's working well. Now we put this on correctly, like that. everything moves nice and good. If I spin this gear here, gears are moving ever so slightly. That's good. So close it back up. You remember this was the small gear. There's a smaller standoff there. Right, or the small, not the small gear, the small screw. Screw it back in. Screw this back together. Screw this screw back in. It was a relatively small gearbox, so a lot of gearboxes you do see in Chinafakes are going to be a bit more complex than this. They're going to be a bit more... make sure the screws are aligned right. There we go. They are going to be a bit more complex, potentially a bit more hard to master. But should have given you about an approximate taste of what was likely going on there, or what would likely be going on inside of a similar item. We'll screw. We're going to do these top screws first, so that way we can have everything sort of straightened out. So that way the rest of the screw holes remain straight. Well, we screw it back in. There you go. There we go. Because we've messed around with the motor, we're going to turn it on for a sec. Turn it back off. Let any power that was in there drain out. So that way, if there was any power in there, it will be gone. And we will return in our next segment. And welcome back. We've got the gearbox all nicely tucked back in there. Oh, gotta remember, put this extra gear in the way it was before. There we go. We want to make sure. Now we're going to talk about second type of repairs you're going to encounter. And these are the more difficult repairs. And these are electronic and chip-related repairs. Stuff like wiring. Now we're going to talk about what happens if a wire is disconnected and you don't know where it goes. You might want to look at other instances of the toy that you have that have the same chip. You might want to just try hooking random components up to random things, but make sure you are careful with this. You do not want to connect something to somewhere where it should not be for an extended period of time and accidentally break something or screw something up or fry something. It's not good. It's not what you want. We're here to repair things, not break them further. So you can try just stripping the ends of wires, touching them to stuff, seeing what happens. There might obviously be missing wires, so all the wires needed to make stuff work in the toy might not be there. You might have to, which is what the extra wires here are for. You can grab some, you can... but it's really more of a step. It's kind of hard to demonstrate visually or in a video. Just probe around with things. Once you feel you've got something, obviously you want to focus on getting power to the chip first. You want to focus on getting power to the motor. You want to figure out, which ones are positive and which ones are negative, and this sort of stuff can easily be done with a multimeter. You can see, fluctuating voltages often mean that's the speaker wire, or if they're fluctuating in a very specific up and down pattern, then it's likely the lights. If they're, etc., etc. Another sort of repair you might encounter are repairs with mechanical lights. I don't have anything with mechanical lights to demonstrate that, but there are two little pieces of metal and a little gear, and they touch against each other like that, and they make the lights flash. These might be too far apart or too close together. There might be a stray wire sticking out that's sort of meant to be wrapped around a little pole that the metal touches instead, like that. So you might want to look for that if the mechanical lights aren't working. If it is two pieces of metal, or if it is a wire, you want to make sure they're in the right position. You want to make sure they're touching correctly. Light repairs. We're going to talk about light repairs. So, bad light, whatever. You want to cut off the two terminals where the lights are, right? You want to cut off the two wires right before where the light is, right? You'll need a wire cutter for this, or a wire stripper, or something related, something like. Hold on, I'm gonna get one. One of these doohickeys. There you go. This is also good for crimping wires, or really anything you might need to do with wires. So you might need one of those as well to add to your inventory of tools. That's really only if you're doing wire-related repairs in a very large scale. But you never know. Might happen. It's happened to me before. So anyways, cut off the thing. You want to get a new bulb. If it's a little mini light bulb, you want to use a little mini light bulb. They tend to have a little sort of like tapering at the end. And then LEDs are just sort of dome-shaped. So you want to make sure you're using this specific kind of bulb or LED that you want. Again, if you just search like mini light bulb or mini LED for toy or something similar, results should show up. You can wait for it to arrive, or if you've already got them, you could just... But anyways, end goal, solder the new one in there. Make sure it works. You want to try it with, both orientations on the wires to make sure that it's the right polarity if it doesn't work at first. Now, speaker repairs. Again, pretty simple. I think I went over this already. Remove the wires from the speaker. Take out the speaker. Put in the new speaker. Put the wires back on the speaker. It's pretty simple. Pretty easy to figure out. So if your toy isn't making sound, you might want to touch the wires of another toy to the speaker. You might also want to just really touch anything that makes sound to the contacts of the speaker so that the speaker makes noise. You can test it with a speaker that you know is good. And if the good speaker makes noise when the thing is touched to it in the specific orientation, and the bad speaker, or the supposed bad speaker does not, you can pretty much safely conclude the speaker's bad. If this back part of the speaker has come off, it may be fixable by just, reorienting some stuff, putting the back of the speaker back on, and gluing it back in place, but you might not get the greatest sound out of it, so sound quality might be reduced, not like it was very good to begin with anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. So make sure that, so if it doesn't sound right, you might want to just go for outright replacing the speaker if the speakers come apart and you try to put it back together and it doesn't sound right. We're going to talk about now the hardest part of electrical repairs. Just scratch my head. Chip repairs. There's going to be chip touching in this, so make sure you know what you're doing. You want to very, very carefully, right? You don't want to touch like that. You don't want to touch too many electrical contacts. You want to locate the screw on the chip. There's usually only one. Undo it very, 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 very carefully. remove it. If the screw is stuck in the chip, just leave it stuck in the chip. Don't try to push it out. If it comes out, then that's great. You can set it off to the side. Make sure you know what screw it is, what it's for. There are a few things you might need to replace. There are resistors, which look like, well, I'll pull one out. Hold on. Resistors, which sort of generally look like this. They tend to look like that. There's none on this chip, but resistors tend to have little bands on them. You want to pull out a online resistor calculator. You want to make sure you've got the orientation of the resistor right. You can find online resistor calculators. You can look at the ohms and the watts and all that good stuff, and then you can find a replacement resistor in your little kit of resistors if it's in there, or if it's not, you can look up the specifications and order the specific one that you need. Alright, so the other thing you might need to replace are capacitors. They look like this. Sometimes they're longer. You want to look. There's usually, there you go, a little text on the side, there you go. 47UF, if you will, and 16V, if we zoom in here. Oh, that's great, my refrigerator just kicked in. You can barely see it. You want to either find a resistor with that same sort of voltage, right? Look for it. You want to make sure it's 47 and not 4.7. I'm going to look real quick just to make sure. Right? Nope, that's 47. You know, if you've not got one like I do, if I don't have one currently, you can order a replacement. So you want to replace the capacitor. I've been calling it a resistor. You want to replace the capacitor. You want to know which side is the minus. It's usually got little minus little lines on it, or, you know, sometimes they're just like sort of weird bulges like this, like little like ovals. Like little rectangles with like rounded corners. It's weird. But you want to make sure you match up the negative side properly. If you have trouble telling which is the negative side, check, you know, they should usually be connected to wires on the chip, so you want to make sure you can figure out which of those wires goes to the negative contact. If they aren't, then then you can just use a multimeter to measure the voltage going through there. Transistors are a bit harder. You'll need to find the specific part number on the transistor, if there is one, right here. Number, or, you know, whatever. This is a transistor. You want to remember where all 3 pins go. You want to find, again, you can't see, there's very, very, very small text. Could get to reflect, right? You can't see it, but trust me, there's very small, barely legible text on there. You want to read that. You want to look up an equivalent transistor online and replace it. Once you're done with that, you want to very, very gently align this screw here. Hold it in place by the edges. So signs of a bad capacitor are the chip cutting out, the chip not working right, especially when under large amounts of stress, like moving on the floor or bumping against something. When the toy is, I mean, not the chip. That would be weird. Signs of a bad resistor are just no sound coming out, pitch fluctuating. Signs of a bad capacitor can also be no sound coming out. If you hear either of these problems, turn off the toy as fast as humanly possible to prevent the chip frying. Do not continue to play with it. Do not poke around and troubleshoot. Turn it off. This may be the difference between having a working chip and a chip that is completely fried. Turn it off as soon as possible. I cannot emphasize this more. If you hear these problems, don't go, oh no, it might be something else, it's fine, I want to show this to people, you know, whatever, I want to play with this, whatever. Turn it off. Turn it off. Anyways, now that we've got chip repairs done, we want to work on switch repairs. Yay, switches. This one's got a push switch, so remember where these two wires go. Get a equivalent push switch, which I don't have, or like an equivalent, normal switch like this one. Make sure you know where the terminals go. Screw it in, or hot glue it in, or however they've done it. And then, boom. Now we're going to talk about closing up the toy. Again, we're going to refer to our little screw diagrams. We're going to make sure everything's all fine and dandy. We're going to grab these little wheels here. We're going to be careful. We're going to lift it up. A lot of times lifting it up off the ground, especially with stuff like these wheels, will help. We want to put this in the right spot. This tail here in the right, this tail like that, like so. This might be hard to do, so obviously if you want, we can, or if we need to, we can do this in a slightly different way, where we can have this on the top here. But you want to close it up, you want to align everything properly, you want to put all the screws back in. Before you put all the screws back in, though, you want to put the batteries in, turn it on, make sure that everything's working. If it's not, take it apart again, and that'll reduce the need to, undo screws hundreds and hundreds of times. And that's how to successfully repair a Chinafake. If you follow these instructions and you do them well, you should have no further problems. I gotta figure out how to put this thing back together. Oh, I just thought of this as I was putting the thing back together. Make sure to refer your screw diagrams and all that good stuff. Also, when you're doing screws, do not over-tighten them. You might break plastic. Oh, I forgot that we were going to do some putting the toy back together stuff too. So first up, repairing the bump and go. Pretty easy. You want a small screwdriver, preferably a flathead. I'm going to go get a small flathead. Hold on. Could not get a small flathead, so this will have to do. Small flathead are somewhat equivalent wedge tools. If you've got long enough fingernails, you can try and pull the tab back manually. Sort of like this, whilst pulling it up. Pulling it up, like that. That doesn't work, which oftentimes it won't. Small flathead, push the gear back. You might need to wedge it under while pushing down on the other side of the bump and go. Might need to pull a bit. Do not pull excessively around the edges. Do not. If one side doesn't work, try the other side. There we go. Make sure not to break any tabs. Make sure to remember which orientation this is, because in relation to the bump and go, not all times. For instance, this time there wasn't, but a lot of times there's little divots for the gear. So if this gear is split, right, if this gear isn't moving right, you want to find similar rods. If this is missing, and it's just this bit, similar this. If you don't have similar either of those, or if it's like a weird gear, you can take this gear off very carefully. Take this, like a wedge or something similar, but wedge it carefully. Take this bit off, and put on a bump and go from something else. If you got an equivalent thing, you can then close it all back up, nice and carefully. Again, if it isn't closing, try it the other way. It might not be the right direction. There we go. And then boom. Make sure to test it, make sure it moves around right. If it doesn't move around right, try another combination of bump and go and gear and stuff. What did we talk about? I already did talk about how to, you want to grab onto the sides here, move the thing. That's how you, undo a locked motor if necessary. Anyway, so that's the video for real this time.